Welcome back to Stories Aloud, where we bring timeless ideas to life through stories that inspire growth and clarity. Today we dive into Good to Great by Jim Collins, a deep exploration into why greatness isn't luck, but discipline. It's a story about focus, persistence, and the quiet strength that turns good intentions into lasting excellence. The mission of this exploration is, well, it sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult. We're tearing into excerpts from Jim Collins' seminal work, Good to Great, trying to find those universal, timeless principles. What separates the companies that achieve sustained, really stellar results from those that just stay average? And Collins sets a pretty provocative stage right away. Good is the enemy of great.
That really hits you, doesn't it? And that provocation, it's backed by some serious data. I mean, this wasn't just a quick weekend project or something. The research took, 10.5 people years of effort, generated hundreds of millions of bytes of data. They used this method they called the black box approach. Basically, they systematically found these companies that made huge transformations, think Walgreens or Kimberly-Clark, and then, crucially, compared them. They compared them against carefully picked peers, the comparison companies like, say, A&P, Eckerd, or Scott Paper, companies that had, all the same starting advantages, but just never made that leap to great.
Yeah, that comparison thing, that's the real magic, I think. It lets you cut through all the noise, right? Because if both the great company and just the good one use similar compensation systems or maybe the same technology, well, then those things clearly aren't the real drivers of the transformation.
Exactly. So what they managed to isolate were these core principles, things focused on disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. And, when you actually look at what those drivers are, they kind of fly in the face of almost everything we usually celebrate in business culture today.
Okay, let's unpack that first big finding then. Because, yeah, it really challenges that whole mythology around the CEO, the
Yeah.
level 5 leader. I mean, if I ask you, our listener, to picture a CEO who turns a company around, you probably imagine someone really charismatic, right? A larger-than-life visionary, maybe even famous. But what did the data actually show?
It showed something, paradoxical, really. The companies that made the leap were consistently led by people who had this almost unique combination. Extreme personal humility, side by side with this intense professional will. Their ambition wasn't for themselves, not for personal fame or fortune. It was all channeled, fanatically into the long-term success of the institution, making sure it would thrive long after they were gone.
And the prime example they use is Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark. He sounds like the total opposite of that charismatic CEO image. Just a mild-mannered, quiet guy, apparently unfashionably dressed. An in-house lawyer. You'd probably never pick him out in a crowd. And yet he had this absolutely ferocious resolve.
Oh, completely. His professional will was, legendary, according to the book. There's that story about him losing part of a finger on the job and just being back at his desk the very next day.
Wow.
Or commuting weekly for cancer radiation therapy, but still keeping a full work schedule. He apparently told his board something like, hey, I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
And that intensity, it wasn't just personal grit. It really fueled the big decisions he made for the company.
And he definitely needed that intensity because he had to make this incredibly tough call, basically gutting the company's entire legacy business. He saw that Kimberly-Clark's traditional paper mills were, just heading for mediocrity. So he made this unbelievably gutsy decision to sell all the mills, the traditional core of the business, and pivot the whole company into consumer paper products, things like Huggies and Kleenex, which meant forcing them to go head-to-head against giants like Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, talk about an act of extreme will. Wall Street apparently thought it was stupid, mocked the move. But you can't argue with the results. Kimberly-Clark ended up generating cumulative stock returns, 4.1 times the general market. They achieved real, enduring greatness.
And that enduring part is the key difference, isn't it? When you contrast that quiet institutional focus with the more ego-driven level 4 leaders they found in the comparison companies, people like Al Dunlap or Leah Kaka come to mind.
Right. Those leaders, they often delivered these huge, immediate, very high-profile jumps in performance. It looked great for a while, but they didn't set the company up for sustained success. It was too much about them. They sort of personalized the company's greatness. So when they left, the whole structure often kind of crumbled because they hadn't built those institutional mechanisms, things that would last beyond their own personal energy. The level 5 leader, on the other hand, Collins says, they look out the window when things go well, crediting the team or luck or external factors, but they look in the mirror when things go badly. Takes responsibility.
That shift from just the individual leader to the whole institutional system, that brings us nicely to the next big step they identified. First, then what? And this isn't just like hire good people. It sounds like a much deeper ingrained cultural priority.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's the core operating principle of what Collins calls disciplined people. The good to great companies were just fanatical about getting the right people on the bus first, and maybe even more importantly, getting the wrong people off the bus, before they spent a lot of energy figuring out exactly where that bus was going to drive. And the logic behind it is pretty compelling, actually. If you start with who, well, the whole problem of how to motivate and manage people, it largely just melts away. But because A players, they don't really need to be managed in the traditional sense. They're self-motivated. They want to be part of building something great, an A-plus effort.
Okay, but I have to push back just a little bit there. Because imagine you're taking over a company that's in crisis. The pressure must be absolutely immense to announce some big new strategy right away, just to calm the markets or the board.
Yeah.
How do you resist that?
Yeah, and that's exactly where the discipline comes in. Look at the example of David Maxwell at Fannie Mae. He takes over a company that's losing, what, $1 million every single business day. I mean, bleeding cash. The board is screaming for new strategy, understandably. But Maxwell, he spends his first crucial months just defining the standard. What does an A player look like here? And then making the really tough people decisions based on that standard. I think 14 out of 26 top executives ended up leaving. He flat out refused to jump to the strategy until he was absolutely certain he had the right who on that leadership team, people who shared his commitment to that A-plus effort.
And you mentioned earlier they make this important distinction between being rigorous and being ruthless.
Yeah.
That seems particularly relevant when we're talking about hiring and firing.
Absolutely critical difference. The comparison companies, they were often ruthless, characterized by layoffs happening like 5 times more frequently. It seemed like almost a chronic addiction to restructurings, often aimed more at just cutting costs quickly rather than actually building long-term performance. The good to great companies, though, they were rigorous. And rigor means you apply those incredibly high standards consistently, starting at the top with management first, making sure that every single seat on that bus is filled by someone who truly belongs there, someone who doesn't actually need to be managed tightly. Collins puts it starkly. The moment you feel you need to tightly manage someone, you've probably already made a hiring mistake. And delaying the necessary action isn't fair to anyone, especially not to your best people who end up having to carry the extra weight.
Okay, so once you've got these disciplined people on the bus, how do you then focus all that intense professional will they bring? This seems like where we shift from disciplined people to what Collins calls disciplined thought. And maybe the intellectual heart of the book that sometimes gets overlooked, the hedgehog concept.
Yes, exactly. The hedgehog concept acts as this essential filter for pretty much all action. And it wasn't easy. Every single one of the good to great companies apparently spent years literally struggling to figure out their own hedgehog concept, which is basically this simple, crystal clear understanding of what the company can be truly excellent at, and just as importantly, what it cannot.
Right, and it's defined by where those 3 simple circles overlap. They sound simple, but they must be brutally hard to answer honestly. What are those 3 circles again?
Okay, so the first circle is, what are you deeply passionate about? What really drives the people in the organization? The second is, what drives your economic engine? What's the key metric? Often it boils down to a single denominator, something like profit per customer, or profit per store, or per whatever is key to your business. And the third circle, maybe the most critical one, what can you be the best in the world at? Not just good at or competent at, but truly the best. The hedgehog concept is that simple, unifying insight you find right there at the intersection of all 3.
And if we look back at Darwin Smith and Kimberly Clark again, his big transformation, it wasn't just a random pivot, was it? It was him finding their hedgehog. He realized, okay, we probably can't be the best in the world at running paper mills anymore. But maybe we can be the best of the world at paper-based consumer products, like disposable diapers, where the key economic driver was maybe profit per consumer brand. And that disciplined thought, that insight, is what gave him the conviction to make that incredibly painful decision to sell off the mills.
Precisely. Once they found that intersection, they focused their entire existence on it. And maybe just as crucially, they started saying no to everything else, all the opportunities that looked good but fell outside that hedgehog concept.
Okay, so you've got your disciplined people. They're guided by this disciplined thought, the hedgehog concept. Now comes the execution part, the disciplined action, which requires somehow surviving the tough realities, the inevitable struggles of a big transformation. And this brings us to that psychological framework they needed, the Stockdale paradox.
Yeah, the Stockdale paradox is absolutely essential because any major transformation is going to be long, it's going to be grueling, there will be setbacks. So it demands that you hold these two apparently contradictory beliefs in your head at the same time. One, retain absolute unwavering faith that you can and will prevail in the end no matter how difficult things get, and indeed at the exact same time. Two, confront the most brutal, harsh facts of your current reality. Don't stick your head in the sand.
It's such a powerful idea for mental toughness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who survived years as a high-ranking POW in Vietnam. And he observed something fascinating. It was the eternal optimists, the ones who kept saying, oh, we'll definitely be out by Christmas or surely by Easter. Those are the ones who often didn't make it. They died of broken hearts. Because paradoxically, their optimism stopped them from confronting the brutal facts of their day-to-day existence.
Exactly. You need that duality to avoid getting paralyzed by despair, but also to avoid being crushed by false hope. Take Kroger, the grocery chain.
Yeah.
They faced the brutal fact that the old-school grocery store model was basically becoming obsolete, dying out. But they didn't despair. They held on to the faith that they could still become the #1 grocery chain in America. And because they faced the facts, they immediately started the methodical, difficult, store-by-store conversion to the modern superstore concept. It took years. Meanwhile, A&P, their comparison company, they knew the same facts. They even ran experiments like their Golden Key stores that proved the new model worked. But they just couldn't fully confront the implications. They essentially stuck their heads in the sand, defending the old model until it was far too late.
And that methodical, relentless effort, Kroger's store-by-store overhaul, Kimberly-Clark's slow, deliberate pivot that's captured perfectly by the other big analogy in the book,
Yep.
the flywheel. We're talking about achieving sustained greatness here, not some sudden, overnight, dramatic breakthrough moment.
Right. The flywheel is all about the nature of how transformation actually happens in these companies. Imagine pushing a giant, incredibly heavy flywheel. That first push, it's absolutely grueling. Maybe it moves just an inch. The second push, another inch. It takes relentless, persistent effort, turn upon consistent turn, always pushing in the same direction, a direction that's consistent with your hedgehog concept, until slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, momentum starts to build and builds and builds until it's compounding, almost self-propelling. There's just no single defining moment, no miracle action that causes it. It's the accumulation of effort.
Yeah, and that invisibility, that lack of a big bang during the build-up phase, that's what's so counterintuitive, I think. They mentioned Circuit City, right? How they're apparently 10 years into this flywheel process before the business press even really noticed. And then the press starts asking questions like, so what was the one big push? What was the program that caused this thing to suddenly go so fast? Which, based on the flywheel idea, is just a completely nonsensical question. It misses the entire point.
Exactly. They were looking for that one magic bullet, that breakthrough event. But the great companies understood that the breakthrough isn't an event, it's the natural, cumulative outcome of a long, disciplined process. The comparison companies, on the other hand, they were often stuck in what Collins calls the doom loop. They kept trying to skip that hard build-up phase and jump straight to breakthrough, usually through some big, dramatic, often ill-considered move, like R.J. Reynolds' disastrous acquisition of the Sealand Shipping Company. Totally unrelated. And when those big bets inevitably failed to produce immediate results, what did they do? They'd lurch violently back in another direction, trying a completely different strategy, grinding that flywheel, whatever momentum they might have had, to a complete halt, just back and forth, reaction after reaction.
Okay, so if we pull it all together, then this whole system of disciplined people leading to disciplined thought, driving disciplined action, really sounds like transformation isn't primarily about speed or radical innovation necessarily. It's much more about, well, consistency and focus.
It really is. It boils down to conscious choice and incredible discipline applied consistently over a long period of time. And actually, that brings us to one final, maybe provocative thought that's related directly to discipline.
The surprising value of the stop doing list.
Ah, okay. Subtraction for success, kind of.
Yeah, you could put it that way. Collins found that these level 5 leaders and their teams, they focus just as much energy, maybe even more sometimes, on figuring out what to stop doing. They were actively eliminating all the extraneous junk, the bureaucratic processes, the activities, the distractions that just didn't align tightly with their hedgehog concept. Because by stopping those things, they freed up all that precious energy and resources to pour directly into pushing the flywheel forward. Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, again, provides some great, really simple examples of that kind of focused subtraction, doesn't he? He saw things like title creep and too many management layers becoming a drag. So what did he do? He just unplugged fancy titles, eliminated layers. Simple. And crucially, he stopped playing the whole annual forecast game with Wall Street analysts because he recognized that game forced everyone into a damaging short-term focus. By just eliminating that activity, he created the mental space, the organizational space, for his team to concentrate fully on the long-term transformation defined by their hedgehog.
That is the discipline of level 5 in action. They didn't just tinker around the edges or reallocate a few resources. They made the ultimate stop-doing decision. They completely eliminated their original core business, selling off all those paper mills specifically to free up all of that trapped energy and capital so they could invest it entirely into what they determined they could be the best in the world at. So the question maybe for you, the listener, is, what are the bureaucratic habits, the meetings, the reports, the activities that are currently consuming energy in your own life or your organization? What do you need to simply unplug or put on your stop doing list to free up that energy and allow your own flywheel to start turning or turn faster?
Good and to the point. Great reminds us that greatness isn't about speed. It's about direction and discipline. If these lessons spark something in you, share this episode and subscribe to Stories Aloud for more timeless insights from the world's most influential books. Until next time, keep listening.